All right. Thank you for joining us for this facet. And it's today's date is August 24th to 2024. We have been studying the works of Theaster Gates in Chicago for a little bit. And then I was excited when our friend Maria Fee wrote a book about his work. So during our time today, we're going to just talk about the implications of one man's work, one man's journey, and how that affects the people around him on a regular basis. But we're also going to apply these these concepts and these ideas to us.
Mhm.
Like we are all unique individuals with our own backgrounds and our own facets of what we bring, and so we want to explore with God and apply that to our own lives and our own imaginations. So, a lot of the time, in fact, every time at the end of a facet, we have an art response. And today's art response has no preparation. We didn't send out a supply list. We really, and we don't always do that. Usually we have a more focused exploration of a medium or a concept. Today we're going to invite God into our imaginations and do something that is pretty specific to where we are and who we are. So that will be just using whatever's around you. And so when we get to that point, we will do a little bit of guided instruction, but it's literally whatever's around you at this moment. And it can be extremely simple, like a pencil and a piece of paper. So God will guide you. But we'll be looking at the way that Theaster used reclaimed materials and the specificity of those materials in his life. We're going to explore that for our own lives, which of course is going to be different. So
Mhm.
for everybody. Um, so a quick overview of the concept of facet is I came up with this in prayer a couple of years ago when we were teaching about wholeness. And so these series that we do for webinars, I don't think I introduced myself yet. Sorry. I'm Jessie Nilo. For those of you watching later, all of you on right now know me and I know you too really well. This is Amy Way. Say hi, Amy.
Hello.
So we are co-hosting the facet today. And each facet has a different theme. And today is art for people's sake. So we're going to be speaking about that today. The many facets of who we are is how God has made us very individually, beautifully unique, right? And whole, like he made us to be a whole human being. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. And so we love to take those equations, and I have this cool little thing that I teach about this. Have you ever seen like one of those little this plastic gem with all these little facets cut into it, and it might be shaped like a circle, or it might be shaped like a sphere, or like an oval, or even a heart. So there are heart-shaped ones out there on the market. I don't know how crooked that is. But like if you imagine one of these kind of a facet laden heart that just sort of reflects as you turn the thing every which way, and it's got these beautiful ways of catching the light no matter what way you turn it, right? And so I like to provide an opportunity to reflect on the different facets of ourselves. Like we are one creation. This represents Jesse Nilo, except this heart that is multifaceted, like a gem that you might buy for a trinket or something, is made of plastic, or maybe a real gem that has actual, facets of value cut into it. In my life, my heart is a heart of flesh because Jesus has taken my heart of stone and made it his and given me tenderness and responsive nature to the Holy Spirit. So it's not a completely accurate metaphor, but it's good enough. So I might look at the facets of my life and write some things into there for like, I love Harley Davidson motorcycles. That's a facet of my life. I am an artist. That's a facet of my life. It's not my whole identity or anything. My identity is an entirety of me living in Christ, right? But I have a facet over here that's like, I like to plant flowers in my yard. I like dogs. I am married to my husband. I have some kids. That thing. These are things that kind of make up who I am. They're different facets of me. Maybe I'm a student. Maybe I'm a teacher. Maybe, I don't know, what are some other facets that we might have?
Neighbor.
Yeah, neighbor is a
Um,
facet of who we are. Um, if you're an artist, if you're a minister, if you're
mhm.
both, those would be facets of who you are. They're not your entire identity. They can't become that. So, a simplified chart of making this, I feel like, and I was thinking about that this morning. If you make a heart on your own piece of paper, you could put more fluid lines in there because these facets are very fluid. These can be crossing over. You can make some curved lines to represent that heart of flesh that we have. So maybe that's a more accurate way of representing the facets of the heart. But that's a really cool way, if you want to fill in some of the facets of who you are after this facet is over, during this facet. If the Lord is bringing things to your mind that, hey, this is an important facet of who you are, of your
Mhm.
life. Um, these things can change and morph and grow. And like maybe I'll be interested 10 years in from now in something that I haven't been before. Brand new facet of who I am. Great. So that's just a sort of an overview of how we teach during Facet, and we love to focus on a particular facet of the Lord during each gathering like this. And today's facet is about art for people's sake. And so before we show this video of Theaster Gates and the art that he does for people's sake, I do want to validate art for art's sake. I kind of feel like it's like an oxygen mask. Like, put on your own oxygen mask so that you can help the person next to you. I feel like we need to value art for art's sake so that we can offer art for people's sake. Otherwise, it turns everything into utility and shallowness and things like that. So, art for art's sake, it's just about beauty and transcendence and the way that God made things. Because He's this amazing designer and He made art. It's His idea.
Mhm.
Beauty is His. He is beauty. Whew. So, like, yeah, let our minds be blown by that a little bit and celebrate art for art's sake, and then we can offer art for people's sake because art is so healing and is so beautiful and empowering and is transcendent by nature. So it's not like art for people's sake is having an arm wrestling match with art for art's sake. No, actually there's a progression.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm going to show this amazing video of Theaster Gates, and then we can kind of just hear some thoughts about that. Amy's got some thoughts about the facets of one person who is making a big difference in the world. So um, I'm going to show the video. I'm going to share my screen, and please excuse the clunkiness while I share my screen. Gotta find my stop sharing my screen. Yeah, well, what did you guys think about that video briefly? Yeah, isn't that good? I know. Well, Amy has some thoughts about the facets of the Aster Gates and how we can celebrate that without alienating ourselves.
Right. Like I think, there's the obvious ones, right? Chicago native, um, black male. If you get more into his story, his dad was a roofer. He talks about some what he inherited and how he kind of merged those worlds. He's a teacher, he's a neighbor, but like thinking
Mhm.
even outside of those things for ourselves. He's hospitable, a gatherer, those sort of things, maker. He's also a potter, letting all of those facets, not just externally obvious, but also those things that kind of are more internal. His care for the poor, his care for things that are going to be just discarded. And one of the things in Maria, your book, where he's like, I believe in places, I believe in people, I believe in the value of material things. That's also facets of someone, because not everybody has that same level of care. We each have our own cultural heritage. Yeah, think of facets in like, yeah, a multifaceted way, I guess.
Right. And it's not about comparison, because if we look at somebody who is active in his community, um, as a Black male, as
Mhm.
somebody who sees beauty in abandoned buildings,
Mm.
as somebody who has a heart for hosting, a heart
Mhm.
for cooking, is in his book. We'll talk about that chapter in Maria's book
Mhm.
on the hosting meals that he wants. I mean, there are so many specific things. The materials that he uses, that his father as a roofer, are now passed down to him.
Right.
We don't have to look at that and feel threatened.
No, I think there's an appreciation of your own history,
Mhm.
as I definitely noticed. I love, as a found objects, I love gathering, I love all these things, but I'm not about to pretend and I'm an urban planner. I'm just not. I'm also
Right.
not a Black male.
Right.
Like there's so many things, and it's really about appreciating where you have access, what you have the skills for, what you have the experience with, and letting God, show that in a site specific way. And
At this very season in
mm-hmm.
your very life, and allowing the Lord to flow through, open our eyes, give us ideas, teach us to rest, because we can't just do either. Like, we have to serve from a place of totally resting.
And being
Yeah,
being
and
who you
knowing who
are.
we are. And then rather than like labeling or segmenting ourselves, to connect with other people and yet be like, have that generosity of spirit to be like, this could work, and if it doesn't, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna try
Mm-hmm.
this. We're gonna open a studio. I'm saying we are gonna open a studio
Yeah, I'm all
in
for it.
Boise someday. We just know this. I don't know when it's gonna happen, but I'm so excited. Like, every day I think about it multiple times. That is a facet of my heart, and
Yeah.
it does not define me. It
Mm-mm.
doesn't, like, it's not like I can't wrap myself up into that in a way that will demolish me if it doesn't happen, or,
Right.
oh no, I have this sudden disability in my life. Who am I anyway? We have to know who we are and celebrate our multiple facets.
Yeah, we don't have to always go somewhere else to do the things. It's
Yeah.
like the other quote about it being, where he asked the question, is it possible to stay in a place and demonstrate transformation?
Theaster Gates says that.
Yeah, and the
Yes.
quality of life by just being artful in a place. Think about like being artful wherever you are. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm gonna bring on our friend Maria, since you are here joining us. Um, Maria Fee is an amazing artist. She works with materials that are paper based a lot, and makes the most beautiful installation work.
Mhm. Yes.
I have known her since Christians in the Visual Arts is where I met Maria. We had lunch together a few times, and just connected with she was getting her degree in theology at the time, I believe, and one of your degrees of many degrees. And I was running a local art ministry, so it was really fun to hang out with you, Maria, and talk about ideas of possibilities and ways of looking at the world. That it really benefits when we get to share those types of things with each other, and the different ways that we see and let that form us. So
Mhm.
thank you for being here, Maria. I will ask you to unmute, and I'm going to spotlight you and us so we can have a cool conversation about your book. Maria, maybe you could tell us about the facets of Maria. Like, why were you like, I am going to publish this amazing book? The book is called
Mhm.
Beauty is a Basic Service. And it just, the title makes me want to do a cartwheel or something because it is so true, you know. Theology and hospitality and the work of Theaster Gates. You've done a lot of research on him and his projects. But what made you want to write the book? Let's start from there and talk about, um, you know, how who you are plays into your book that you've written.
Thank you for the invitation to do so. So I'm going to start kind of laying out the facets of my Christianity, so you all know where I'm coming from. It's really valuable when I say something, you know, like you can already judge me. Anyway, but not judging in a kind way.
Yeah.
So basically, for most of my Christian life, my theology has been shaped by Protestant Christianity, although there's Catholic leanings in there. Since I'm a Latina, it seeps through. But early on in my faith, it was heavily relied on spiritual experiences, wonderful, intimate, getting to know Jesus experiences. But when I look back, the rough edges of that was that those experiences were needed in order to maintain the anxiety stemming from a religion that stressed personal sin and personal salvation.
Mm.
So that's the first part of my Christian formation. The second part of my Christian formation is my theological education, which is mainly through Protestant Reform, evangelical Reform theologies. Very systematic theology. And so it kind of opened up the frameworks for me to think about those experiences I had earlier and put them into boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, both stances obviously learned from, positive, but they also had harmful, maybe, I don't know what the word is, but you know, what's the word? I can't think of it. Anyway, but you know, but there's things to still work out through that I'm
Sure.
still currently working out. So, and that mainly my facets as an artist. And so, and again, I want to kind of also talk about facets are the way you also perceive the world. You can't help. If these are your facets and these are who you are, this is how your outlook in the world, this is how you're going to read and interpret the world now. Okay. So facets are valuable in that they, so my facets as a artist is I'm going to engage the world as an artist.
Yep.
And as a woman, I'm going to engage the world in very embodied ways because a woman's body is fluid and has cycles and it's grounded. And so I'm going to engage the world through that perspective. So as a woman, as an artist, as a Latina, which has its experiences, I saw and I felt that in both camps, in the highly spiritual and the highly theoretical, both camps kind of paved over concrete reality or situational things that I have to live with day in and day out, as you know, as being a woman, and so that became the issue that propelled me to go back and get up and figure this. What is this? Why is what I believe not sinking in with how the world is around me and how I experience the world as a woman, as an artist, as a Latina? Okay, why do those two things? Is there like they're kind of like passing by each other?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason why I went back to get a PhD in theology and culture, and that's the reason why I felt like art needed to lead that conversation, that exploration. Art was the way to go about exploring that question, right? Because that's being embodied, that's reality, and that's dealing with the situational, and that's what Gates does, as we saw in the video. So that's
Yes.
who I am. Those are my facets. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, a lot of modern Christianity traditions do have that disconnect between the mind and the body, between daily life and spirituality. There's this kind of like either a headiness or a spiritual disconnect. Like it's all about the heart or it's all about the mind. And it's like, well, that's not, that's why I love that verse about loving the Lord with all of who we are. And trying to, like, nobody's going to integrate those perfectly, because you're right, Maria. I love how you say what, when we look out at the world, we're looking through that glass dimly, like we don't see the way God sees. God sees all the stuff all the time clearly for what it really is, accurately, and how it all interrelates. We can't possibly. We're seeing kind of through some distortion and some facets of our own that do distort things. So it does affect, but we can still like pray for the Lord to just say, God, can you teach me how to integrate these things in my life in a God honoring way, from the way I talk to my husband when I get my toast, to the way I host a friend at coffee or a webinar on Zoom, or the way I put my dogs in the kennel right before I hit the Zoom webinar start button, or you know what I mean? Like there's this integration of integrity. There's this wholeness that we can live a life of honor and allow the Lord to stir our imaginations so that it can be a sweet rhythm of daily rituals, which include the quietude of living a life with God, and loving our neighbors, which can involve not quietude, I love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one way we can go about learning those things and is actually we have to be in community, right? Because my facets are going to be different from your facets. And I got to learn, I have to sometimes depend on your facets because I don't have them, right? Like you said, Amy, earlier, well, I don't have community development. I don't have a bureaucratic, degree, in urban planning. I don't have that.
Right,
So
right.
what you have to lean on, you can only make art on what you know and your facets and your context, the situational context, and what's been given to you. But you could also collaborate with those who are stronger in certain things. So and that's how we learn. This is why the earlier spiritual experiences that I had really were about personal salvation, personal sins, and really not looking at the social, thinking about how we interact with one another, how we have to learn from one another, how we learn by each other's wounds as well as each other's gifts. And so,
So good.
That is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that was one of the things, like, there was a quote in your book that just like stopped me in my tracks. You quoted Elizabeth Newman.
okay.
And it said, to be recreated by God in and through the life of the church involves all of who we are. It's like when you just mentioned both the wounds and, it's like, and I look at even just the last year, I just moved to Boise less than a year ago, and getting to know community locally, and her strengths are not my strengths, vice versa.
Right.
Yep.
But we also have to be willing to show up with all of who we are and not just keep it locked away.
Yep.
Which would be more my previous bent, would be like, and I'll just pocket this, right? But realizing it's actually more fulfilling as an artist, as whatever all your facets are, to just show up with all of it.
Show up and trust them. Because sometimes because we're so isolated, we're like, I'm a weirdo that I think this way. But really, no, what you're seeing is there's a something is needed in your community. You're pinpointing it because you need it. And so how do you then grab other people to say, we need a maker studio in Boise? So that's, so even what you don't have is the impetus, even what's the wound or what you don't have, or what an issue, a contentious issue, is the thing that's going to propel you into action.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's that way that works through everything from resources to, or the lack of
Yes,
resources to personal
yes,
trauma to whatever. Like we can have these source of contention and, and trouble in our past that turns into something beautiful, um
yes,
just by the sheer healing that is for us, and
absolutely.
the filling of God and the empowerment that we do have around us. And that's why that's part of why community is so important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That-
Gates has a says, like it, because he's ceramicist, he works with clay, so he understands it takes very little to make something very big. And this is what the video showed. Like we as artists uh, learn from exploring our materials and learn from making.
Mhm.
So that's our epistemology. That's our knowledge basis through our hands or what we do. And so as artists, we have a pedagogy. When we share, we teach this knowledge, we transfer those skills into other areas of our life. And as you were speaking, it's like this is why the church needs artists, because we know how to be fluid. We know how to say, that didn't work, let's move on to this idea,
yeah.
and shift and move, because that's what we're making decisions, quick decisions constantly. And we're, a mistake, we learn from our mistakes. Mistakes are actually our bread and butter, right? That's where we get
Mhm.
surprises at work, So
Yeah.
yeah. So all that to say,
Ah,
this is the benefits of having artists, and having artists who are out of the box thinkers
yeah.
in other areas, especially church. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really counters that disconnect when you grow up hearing that things don't matter, like, oh, it's just material. And what really is important is
Yeah.
the thoughts in the brain, or the experience that you have when you're, just like, spirit to spirit connecting with God, and that's all that matters. Everything else is bad or
Yeah.
be trusted.
But
And it's
artifacts matter.
yeah, I love that.
Sure.
The book,
Yes.
you repeat that a few times, that and I thought, well, that's the definition of a noun. Theaster Gates really is concerned about the person, place, and things.
Right.
Like he said what to the group of kids in that video. And if you're watching this recording, we're not going to be able to upload the YouTube video as part of this. You'll have to click the link. You can watch the video. It's 6 minutes long. It's such a good video, though, about just kind of an overview on Theaster Gates' work. He talks to these young people about come back every summer in between, come back afterwards. This is how we're going to nurture these communities. It's through the time and the
Investment.
presence
Mhm.
of real people in real space. And he mentions the time that it takes for commerce and the arts to be introduced to one another. And he said in that video that that takes time too, to kind of work out the relationship of, what's this new art gallery in town? What's it doing there? And, and he mentions it just happens slowly over time. um, what better people than artists to speak to the necessity of using time as a medium? Because we know paint takes a bit to dry. If you're a culinary artist, eggs take a certain amount of time to do their thing. Like we're not disembodied. We live in real space with
Right.
real objects, and the person, place, and thing is a definition of a noun, a person, a place, and the artifacts, the things that we use in daily life, the things that we create in art, they're things, and they're not to be disregarded as unimportant.
Right. I like that, like specifically with the basketball floor, and he was talking about it's a shame, that there's not that place to gather. It's a shame, all these
Yeah.
things, but brings it into a gallery as a place of honor that, hey, this has value. These are, and I think even in each other's lives, places where we can go, yeah, even this wound, not to use people's wounds, but like these places or these things that is like, kind of rubbed us the wrong way, and and coming into a new
Oh, when people use
context.
artists and use our art
Mhm.
for like utilitarian purposes,
Mhm.
to further support
That's another
That's a
another
different
conversation.
yeah, to further support the disconnect between
Yeah.
materiality and ideal land. You know, yeah, it's not choosing between, am I going to be a person who cares for people, place, and things, but doesn't do anything? You know, like the tension between noun and verb. It's kind of like asking if you're going to breathe in or you're going to breathe out. Both. There's both. Yeah, let's do both, you know. Yeah, tell us about your environment that you're in right now, Maria. If you could, there are some beautiful works of art that you have created behind you. And we could have a look. Oh my gosh.
In my house in New York, in Queens. And so those are things that I'm working on. I think everything that you see here is all paper.
Wow.
Sorry. Get a little closer. The driving narrative, for all of it is, and the, I have visual tropes, like visual shapes that I use or symbols that I use which is this driving force of a little bit of what you're talking about facets and multiplicity, and how do we do, like entanglement, like there's entanglement theory, and so so kind of showing how diversity and plurality are pretty much an important part of my work, because I struggled with it in my own early Christianity, even when I went to go to grad school, initially to seminary, was I'm like, as a Christian, I was kind of taught that everybody has to be, for unity's sake, everybody has to look the same, dress the same, read the same books.
Wow.
And so there was a homogenization, because unity was much more important than particularity, what you've been talking about with facets.
Wow.
And so a lot of the work initially began with that. And so I had the circle as a figure, as an entity, and that circle now has been drawn out, drawing out what is, so you see the elongated circle is that kind of stretching out the individual. Wow. And then how they're in relationship with other things around them, and how new things come out of putting these shapes together.
Oh,
so that's a very general statement about the work that's happening now.
I appreciate that so much, and I'm very sorry we sprung it on you the way. It just occurred to me, like, how can we talk about people and place and objects if we're like looking at these beautiful things that surround you, and without talking about that,
well, and the hanging things are kind of like my nests. So getting the, from Gates, and my study of place-based theory, and how and so these are kind of little maquettes. If I could build them larger, I would. But this idea of even the urban setting as a diversity of different multiplicities of people and things, and how even the arts and culture can be the glue, the cohesiveness that brings us together in this beauty of a montage of God's manifold witness in the world, right? And so part of my work as an artist, or my artist soul, is in Christianity, is to hack away at this tendency to be static and cookie cutter and homogenous, and and how do we allow for people to be in leadership and lead in their own strength, instead of having a charismatic leader, not that that's a bad thing, but I'm just, those are the things that I care about and that I'm interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with saying charismatic leader, because that's there's different definitions, a lot of different definitions.
Yes.
But we get it. The kind of driving, there we do need to make room for different leadership styles and people with a different perspective, other than the business model that is so strong in Western culture. I'm not attacking business people, but we need other voices. And so, I think it's really valid.
And our voices are rusty, because we haven't, women, minorities haven't had that opportunity, you know, or even like understanding our own strengths. We live, you know, within our own bodies, we take it for granted. So how we don't have people nourishing those particularities and allowing us to run and lead with those. And so that's, as a educator, that's a very important, valuable part of why I teach, is how do I give my students the space to investigate who they are and what they're doing in the world. And so they do that through a creative project. Yeah.
I want to take your class. Is it so far away?
Yeah, well, it's in I now teach for the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology. So yep.
Yeah,
and it's all online.
That's great. What's your favorite thing in the book, Maria, that you were like, that your heart was singing about when you discovered it, when you wrote it, when you pieced it together? It could be, yeah, anything come to your mind?
There's things that still need to be mined, and I think I really liked studying liturgical theology and studying the Eucharist, and I find that that's my favorite chapter. In what, you know, Gates talks about the power of the symbolic, and what are the symbolic meanings behind a meal, and what you serve and how you serve it, and what enriched environment are you serving in it. And so what is all that doing when you invite people to come and sit at the table, and what all can you do because of that enriched environment? And that is a very interesting proposition for me, and I think it should be for Christians, in that a lot of our faith is dependent on a table. You know, so how do we then that to me is exciting. And then my question to a lot of Christians is, how do we take that tradition of the Eucharist and reframe that to have the power that it needs to have today? And so I love people who there are a lot of artists who do meals or have food as part of their medium, and they're doing fantastic things and talking about hard things, being very critical about that. So, and Gates in Soul Food Pavilion, which I write about in the book, is doing multiple things, because he's also addressing Black history and Black soul food and its privations. Like, you know, how do you make a lot out of a little? You know, even the way that they had to do it, like in the fields, on the, you know, hoe cakes are made off the heat of you know, the plows, right? You know, of the hoe, right? So, and so even that is a critique of our denigration of people and place and things. And so, but yet at the same time, by providing the soul food at his dinners, he's also kind of elevating it as an fine art, right? And so he's doing both at the same time. And I love, see, that's art. Art can do so many things all at once. It is you know, balanced, you know. So that's another reason why within Christianity and churches and liturgies, we need more of it, because it works on so many levels.
Yes, simultaneously,
it really does,
and
all the
different
time.
for every person.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I loved the description in your book about the people, like the choir that came in to sing through the 2-line poetic stanzas of the potter whose work was unearthed as an enslaved Black man who had been a potter, who signed his name on his pottery, which was so rare back then. And then Theaster arranged for a Black gospel choir to come in and sing those stanzas, because he would sign his pottery, you know, potter from 100+ years ago, sign his name and write a little stanza of his own poetry to honor that, and simultaneously to critique the culture that made that
illegal.
Enslaved, you know, the fact that there wasn't a society of named Black potters from the slavery days, to prove his point that there are none except for this man whose work he found. He started a new foundation of enslaved named Black potters, and there was one member, you know. Like, put that up in the gallery as a simultaneously critiquing and healing
Right.
through acknowledgement, not through denial, not through the alteration of history, but a recognition and a facing and a bringing together of people. Ah, I loved
This,
that section.
this is what you're explaining in that's what was, oh yeah, that's To Speculate Darkly. That was a show in Milwaukee. And so what you're talking about, which I like to tell my students, is here is art's capacity to mediate and navigate a group of people through a very difficult conversation.
So good.
Right?
So
And
good.
this is what art does. Art kind of creates this thing outside of ourselves that can navigate, it can kind of be a proxy for us to do the difficult things that we need to do. And this is my shout out to liturgy. Now, liturgy is supposed to do that for us.
Yes, yes, yes.
A liturgy is supposed to take us through the realities of being human with God in sight and help us together to forge through the difficulties that we're going through, but yet still understand God's grace and mercy and love for us. And so we need art in our liturgies to help us navigate through the issues that we're going through, the times that we're going through right now. And you know, again, in the reform perspectives that I kind of been in, it's the sermon that's going to do that for you. And I'm like, well, the sermon is great. I can learn a lot, but it's just going to empty out.
Liturgy,
you know, and
performing art. It was originally, it morphed out of a spiritual encounter or many, and word being art, music being art, interactive art being art, church settings, like Jesus didn't say, here's how you have to build a church building now. It was an expression of art and awe and gathering and hospitality and providing for the needs of the village, specifically in a local setting. And then here are these things we get to say together as a way of acknowledging. And I love what you said about mediate and navigate. Art can do that. Theaster Gates does that so well. He's a visual artist, ceramicist, who also knows how to host and mediate and do it in his book. You wrote about like how he sort of laughingly said, about being not a control
trickster,
like
a trickster.
Yeah, like he's curating the actual conversations that the people at his dinners are having, because he's saying, here are some things to talk about in a safe place. I don't know if he said safe place, but that is something that we get to do if we visual artists can embrace the performative art part of what the potential is for bringing people together. Maybe some are not called to do that, but those who can, like, let's step into that a little bit and see what happens, because it's important.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
As someone who's done ministry and also does in the classroom, and I do this all the time with people who are not artists, and that is a lot of fantastic conversations can happen in front of art. And so as an artist, I love it when a group of people come together physically or online and are asked to look at a piece of artwork together. And it really opens up the door for really profound conversations that normally just a conversation is okay, but because the art there now is showing you different facets, people are, and people come with different facets. The conversation immediately does a dive into the profound. And so I'm sure all of you out there already have experienced that when people are talking about your work, or you take people to a museum, and there's this wonderfully deep spiritual, as a matter of fact, experience that's happening in front of an artwork. And so that's the easiest way to have that experience.
Yeah. I agree. Wow. I've got just a couple minutes left with you, Maria. I just want to thank you again for your generosity and joining us for this Q&A or this interview that we're doing. So you've talked to me about, or you've shared with your favorite parts of the book that you wrote. Were there any parts of this book that were um very difficult for any reason, or or even frustrating for you to write about? And
Sure.
why were those parts frustrating or difficult? And how much access did you have to the man himself? I know he's super busy, like he's with his neighbors. He's there in Chicago and things like that. So how did that all play out for you as you wrote this book?
Yeah, well, so the book is from my dissertation, so that was a bear.
Right. Yeah.
I think, retrospectively, or even after the book, the hardest thing I have, especially, I'm started writing this book probably in 2016, 2017. And so think about all the stuff that has happened since then.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest thing for me to sit well with is that I am perceived as a white woman, and here I am talking about a Black man and his work in a Black neighborhood. And so I struggle, truthfully, I struggle with that. I'm just going to lay my cards on that. That's an issue that I struggle with. And the other issue that I struggle with is I started with Theaster Gates, which helped me to, and in many ways, what I say is he was my guide into a world that, coming from conservative background in theology and Christianity, allowed me into another world, which is the world of Black theology, Black church life, which brought me to even back to my own, helped me to examine my own, who I am, and open the door for me to go into liberation theologies, Latina, mujerista, and explore that, which, so that helped me find myself and my own, and still I'm trying to search what that voice is, because I'm not sure. It's very uneasy, but I have a conviction. My conviction is that I was writing from a very conservative background, and the book was a way for other people who are in similar situation to see that there are other ways of loving and serving God.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Instead of the small cookie cutter, the 12 Christian practices or whatever, we're taught, but there are a multitude of ways. And so this book is just models that, or is an example of how that can be embodied. It's not a
Yeah.
formula, it's just a doorway, an invitation to go back to your facets, to explore what you have to offer and how,
Yes. Yes.
so yes, and to believe in it, to
Yeah.
believe in it. So I think that's that's why I wrote it, is for people like me who knew there was more, but didn't know how to get there.
And did it help you in your journey as you discovered, like, as you were looking at a man who was discovering his relationship to the people, places, and things around him? And what I'm hearing you say is that that greatly helped you and was able to open your own eyes to what the people, places, and things are around you.
Absolutely, absolutely. For starters, the number one thing is that, and this is especially for women, is like, again, in the West, we've been taught that our brains are the thing that matters, that we are human because Descartes, we are because, I think I am, right? I
Think
think,
therefore.
so
Yeah.
yeah, right. So it's all based on this thinkingness. And so as a person of color, as a woman, we go through the world mm, guided through our bodies and how our bodies are perceived in certain spaces, how we have to shift in cultures, right? Like how we have to do shit. Like I'm in this place and it's all white, and I got to shift who I am, and then going back home, and then I got
Yes.
to shift back into that, code switching, however you want to call that. And so
Hmm.
I forgot where we were going, but
Oh,
no.
just
So
the benefits that it's had for you to
oh yeah, so yeah,
yeah.
so it gave me vocabulary for all these experiences that I've had forever.
Mm.
Now I had vocabulary for experiences that I had, that people ahead of me, like um, the Black liberation, even like secular, Audre Lorde, God bless her, so giving a voice to what it means to be a woman and the power that's in a woman's body, and to rely on instincts,
Yeah.
to rely on your own insights, to understand your emotions as that you have an emotional intellect, and that they're telling you something about your body and what's happening in an environment, and that you can do theology from these stances.
Yeah. I mean,
And
yeah.
in reality, this is what really theology is, so
Yep.
yeah, so there's orthodoxy, the right religion, right theology, and there's orthopraxis, now, practicing how we practice.
Yeah.
And your facet with the heart is the orthopathos, reminding us that we're human beings with a lot of emotions that go through a lot in the world that we live in, a lot of it contentious, right? We need the orthopathos to do the orthopraxis. We need the orthopathos to understand what our faith is about and why we need, doctrines. And so those three need to all happen.
Oh, yes. Yes. And amen and praise God. Wow. Thank you, Maria. You are brilliant. You are heartfelt. You are just amazing. I have always admired and respected you and your work. So I just want to thank you again for joining us today. Round of applause, because the Zoom thing doesn't do the clapping very well. So thank you. Thank you. Everybody's clapping for you. Thank you so much for sharing your heart and your book. If you want to pick this up, it is available on the interwebs all over the place. Beauty is a Basic Service by Maria Fee. Thank you for joining us from Queens, New York today. We're going to introduce our next presenter, and I will let Amy do the introduction of her friend.
I would love to welcome Rhodalynn Jetton. We met briefly when I was in Austin. We met a couple times when I lived in Austin, and one of the last things I picked up was her book, Wild Silence. It's poetry, and we were chatting more about this, and I was like, I feel like I need to just go, I feel like there's a poem or something, and I went to my shelf, and I was just drawn to this one, and has agreed to read to us her poem called Before. Thank you so much for coming.
Yes, it's my honor. Thank you guys for having me. So do you want me to just go ahead and read it?
Please. Thank you so much.
Okay. So the poem is called Before. Creativity is living from the truth of your being and moving that truth through your hands. To create means to offer your one-of-a-kind gifts and solutions to this world. That requires courage and grounding in the truth that you are already loved before you even begin.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
We are already loved before we begin.
Yeah.
Yeah, to operate out of that, and
yeah,
it changes what you make.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and it changes why you make it.
It's true.
Tell us more about that if you have a minute.
Yeah, I think that actually my son and I were just having this conversation, and he said, Mom, do you think when we get to heaven, everything will be perfect? And I said, I think when we get to heaven, our perspectives will be clearer, and we'll see that maybe perfection never really existed, but there's a perspective that comes from heaven that is so much more spacious, and that gives us a lot of permission to be who we are. And I'm sure in your own ministries and spheres of influence, you encounter all the time the creative nature of God and the people that you're with, right? And so I think that already knowing that we're loved before we even begin to create really releases us into a deep freedom, because we're not doing it for performance or acceptance, or there's nothing value attached to it because you know you're already valued. And I think that that is really powerful, really rebellious in the current way that the world is functions and has functioned for millennia.
So good. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
So much.
So we're going to transition now into our art response, because being artists, we love to offer the invitation to you to come on in and sit with the Lord and let God fill your mind and heart and soul and strength, because these are all facets of you, and very connected within you, more so than we often realize. I'm going to lead us in a little prayer before we do this. I'm going to have a little bit of music that I turn on so that we can be reflective about this. And after the webinar is finished, you may, of course, keep on hanging out with God and allowing the Lord to speak to you in a way that is personal. I invite you to close your eyes if you want to. You don't have to. Maybe God's telling you no, keep your eyes open. See if the Lord brings anything to mind that is material that is around you. Maybe it is inside of a container that you can't see. So the closing the eyes thing might be a good thing. Lord, we put our next few minutes before you, God, for the purposes of connecting our hearts, our different facets of who we are, and for having you fill our imaginations regarding not only who we are, but who you are. God, some of our understanding about you is distorted, and so we ask for you to step in, and as the way that you do, you work in us through time as well. And time is a medium that you use so beautifully and brilliantly. So, yeah, God, any kind of a thought that we have about you that needs to be shifted, we invite you to do so now. Any kind of thought we have about ourselves that needs to be shifted, we invite you to do so now also. That we would examine it and decide if that is something that you would say about us or not. And give us the courage to discard the thought permanently if it is not something that you would say. And God, we ask you to bring to mind the materials around us that will lead us to thoughts of people, place, and things. Those materials might be reclaimed materials around us. They might be very humble things that we would not even look twice at. It might be a thumbtack. It might be some scraps of paper. It might be something that we've not used for a long time, that we look past it, we don't even notice it. So at any time, you are free to open your eyes, of course, and move about the cabin, as we say. You can feel free to stand up and gather materials. It could be a simple piece of paper and a pencil. It could be whatever you have right there at your disposal. And God, as I turn on this music right now, Lord, for us to reflect with, I pray, Lord, that you would move in each person. Move us toward the people who are in our path. And if time hasn't brought those meetings together yet, that's all right. Maybe it's for the future, but maybe they're already in our path. But Lord, lead us through these very specific material encounters today with you, and with a mind of art for people's sake, God. We are not clones of each other. We're not robots. Lord, I pray that you will meet each person where they are, and that we would have a time with you right now that would be based in truth and beauty and freedom, God. So I'm just going to allow a little bit of time and space as you gather some supplies.